Why does God choose to stay silent right before He blesses you? Could it be that His silence isn't distance, but part of a greater divine plan? What if the delay you're facing is actually the door God is opening for you? Sometimes, what feels like failure is actually the foundation for your true calling. And what if the silence in your life is exactly where God is performing His greatest miracle? Not around you, but deep within your soul. Stay with this video until the very end, because it's in the final moments that you'll discover a truth that could completely shift the way you see silence and stillness in your life. Don't miss it. What you've been waiting for may be waiting for you at the very last second. Let me tell you something that took me years to truly understand. Silence is not a sign of weakness. It's proof of strength. We live in a world that celebrates noise, where applause, cheers, and public validation seem to define our worth. But you know what? The one who learns to remain silent in the midst of the noise is often the one who's already halfway to victory. You don't need to raise your voice to make your point. You don't have to respond to every critic or fight every battle. Sometimes, the most powerful thing you can do is stay silent and keep walking. There's a deep peace that settles in your soul when your confidence no longer relies on the opinions of others. When you truly know who you are, you no longer need to be seen. You stop feeling the urge to explain, to defend, or to chase applause. Your silence doesn't come from fear. It comes from focus. And that focus is too valuable to waste on noise. Here's the truth. Not every battle is worth fighting. Not every voice deserves your response. Some arguments are just distractions, cleverly disguised as debates, trying to lure you away from your divine purpose. I used to think that silence made me appear weak, that if I didn't speak up or correct every misunderstanding, I was somehow giving away my power. But in reality, it takes greater strength to hold your peace than to argue with fools. The strong don't need to speak to be heard. Their life becomes the message. Their results, their peace, their progress. They speak louder than any words. Silence isn't just something you practice. It's a posture of faith. When you remain silent, you're saying, God, I trust you to defend me. I trust you to handle what I cannot. And He will. Sometimes, the door hasn't opened yet. The breakthrough hasn't come. Not because God is absent, but because you're still fighting battles that were never yours to begin with. You're still trying to change outcomes with your words, when what you really need is surrender. God doesn't need your defense. He needs your faith. Remember, when Jesus stood before His accusers, He didn't argue. He didn't shout. He didn't try to justify Himself. He stood in silence because He knew truth doesn't need to be screamed. That silence wasn't weakness. It was power under control. It wasn't retreat. It was authority. And in your life, there will be moments when you're misunderstood, misjudged, underestimated. Let them think what they will. Because in those moments, your silence isn't really silence. It's your strongest declaration. And it's in that stillness that a new season begins. A journey where silence is no longer just a defense, but a weapon of peace and inner freedom. The silence you choose is not weakness. It is a declaration that you are grounded, steady, and unshakable. When you remain silent, you're announcing that your foundation is secure and your identity is not up for debate. Often, the loudest voices come from those who are still searching for validation, for worth, for relevance. But when you're walking in purpose, you don't chase attention. You let your consistency speak. You let your results make the noise. Tree doesn't explain how it's growing. It simply rises, quietly, steadily, without seeking applause. And one day, the very same people who ignored the seed will have no choice but to notice the fruit it bears. Staying silent is not about avoiding conflict. It's about mastering your spirit. You must reach a place where your peace is unshaken, even when others are consumed by chaos. You must grow to the point where other people's opinions no longer interrupt your progress. Hear me on this. When the enemy can't destroy you, he will try to distract you. He'll send confusion, offense, pointless arguments, anything to knock you out of alignment. But if you remain focused, if you refuse to engage in battles that don't serve your purpose, you win every single time. Don't waste your energy proving what God has already spoken over your life. Let them think what they want. Let them say what they will. You just keep building. Keep showing up. Keep doing the work in silence. Because the day will come when your breakthrough will speak louder than your defense ever could. Stay grounded. Stay focused. Stay silent. And watch what God does. Because there is a kind of growth that only happens in silence. Far from the noise. Far from the spotlight. Far from the pressure to perform. We live in a world that tries to convince us we must always be seen to matter, always be heard to stay relevant. But God often works in a different way. He does His deepest work in the unseen places of your soul, where no one is watching, where no one is clapping. And the most powerful seasons of your life might feel the loneliest. Not because you're unloved, but because you're being set apart. And being set apart is not rejection. It's preparation. God often isolates before He elevates. He pulls you away, not to punish you, but to refine you, to reveal who you are without the noise, without the crowd, without the applause. It is in that sacred stillness, where no one sees, where no one applauds, that God begins to teach you how to be whole without needing a crowd to clap for you. Growth demands stillness. It demands discipline. And yes, sometimes it demands that you walk alone. Think about the seed. Before it becomes anything, it must go underground, hidden, unseen. It must break open in the dark before it ever rises in the light. No one celebrates the seed when it's buried. There's no applause for the breaking, but that part is necessary. That isolation isn't abandonment, it's divine development. And in your own life, there will be seasons where God buries you, not to forget you, but to prepare you, to strengthen your roots before He ever allows you to bloom. People around you might not understand what you're doing. They might say you've changed. They might think you've grown distant, cold, or different. Let them think what they want. You're not here to explain your process. You're here to protect it. Because when you're building something real inside yourself, you don't have time to be everywhere or please everyone. You're not available for distractions. When you're committed to your calling, you must learn to embrace those silent seasons, the times when nothing seems to be moving, when your prayers feel like echoes returning to you. But it's in those moments that God is doing His deepest work. He's pruning your heart, healing your wounds, refining your character. And while you may not see the change yet, you will feel it later, when you walk into rooms with quiet confidence, when you no longer need attention to feel valuable, when you stop chasing love from the places that once drained you. That is the fruit of private growth. That is the power of silence. And listen, not everyone is meant to walk with you in this season. Some people were assigned only to your past, not your future. And the longer you try to drag them into places they were never meant to go, the more you delay your own destiny. Let them go. Let them misunderstand you. Let them call it arrogance. You don't owe them an explanation for your process. What you do owe is obedience. Obedience to follow God's direction, even when the path grows quieter, even when it feels narrow and lonely. Because growth is not always comfortable. It will stretch you. It will humble you. It will expose the weak places you used to hide, and it's in that exposure, in the darkness of those quiet, lonely seasons, that God is preparing you for something greater. Not so you can be seen, but so you can be strengthened. So don't run from the process. Don't numb it. Don't avoid it. Lean into it. Lean into the discomfort. Lean into the silence. Because God is not interested in making you popular. He's interested in making you powerful. And real power doesn't need a stage. It doesn't seek applause or attention. Real power walks in purpose, speaks in wisdom, and lives in peace. So when you find yourself in a quiet season, don't rush to escape it. Don't try to fill the stillness with noise. Learn to sit in it. Learn to listen. Learn to become. Because what God is doing in you during those silent moments is far greater than anything the world could ever offer in the spotlight. You are being formed, refined, prepared, not for people's approval, but for divine purpose. Stay in the process. Stay in the silence. That's where your power is born. One of the hardest truths you'll ever learn is this: not everyone deserves access to your journey. Not everyone should have a seat at your table, know your plans, or walk beside you. That's not pride. That's protection. That's wisdom. You can't build a life of peace if you keep handing the keys to people who only bring chaos. Your purpose is sacred, and it must be guarded like something sacred. Because when the wrong people stand in the right places, it always leads to the wrong results. You don't have to explain your every step. You don't need to announce your next move. The most powerful moments of your life will often happen in silence. And the most dangerous thing you can do? It's sharing something sacred with someone who lacks the spiritual maturity to understand it. Just because someone is close doesn't mean they're called to go where you're going. Some people are familiar with you, but not assigned to you. And you must learn to know the difference. We live in a culture obsessed with proving, posting, and publicizing. But listen closely. Your next move should be between you and God. Keep it private. Protect it. You don't need to prove that. You're growing. Growth reveals itself over time. You don't need applause when you've got alignment. You don't need permission when you've got purpose. Let your life speak for itself. Let your character, your peace, and your fruit do the talking. As you've now seen, not everyone is meant to walk beside you, and some of the deepest wounds we carry come from trusting the wrong people at the wrong time with the wrong parts of our hearts. It happens when you allow the wrong voices into your life. You let them into your heart, your vision, your sacred space. And before long, seeds of doubt, confusion, and fear start to take root. That's why you must be selective, not cold, not bitter, but wise. There's a difference between having a good heart and giving it away to people who were never meant to carry it. Some people were only meant to pass through, but you gave them permanent residence. It's time to release whatever no longer honors your growth, because the calling on your life comes with a weight, a responsibility, and you can't share that weight with just anyone. If they don't carry the oil, they can't carry the weight. If they don't understand the cost, they won't respect the blessing. Stop expecting support from people who were never equipped to support you. It doesn't make them bad people. It just means they're not built for your path. And that's okay. Let them go in peace. God often reduces your circle before He raises your platform, because elevation requires separation. And sometimes, what you think is loneliness is actually God clearing the room so He can speak to you without distraction. You can't hear clearly when you're surrounded by noise. You can't grow deeply when you're constantly explaining, defending, or performing. There is power in stillness, in moving quietly, in trusting that what's truly meant for you doesn't need a spotlight to be secure. It's okay to move differently. It's okay to become distant. It's okay to outgrow people, places, and conversations. That's what real growth does. It creates space. Not because you're better, but because you're becoming. You've matured. You've learned to value your time, your energy, your peace. And now, you're no longer quick to hand over your inner space to people who haven't earned it. That's not arrogance. That's stewardship. Because the more God entrusts to you, the more He expects you to protect it. So let them say you've changed. Let them say you've gone quiet. Let them say you've grown distant. They don't see the prayers whispered in secret. They don't know the weight you carry. They can't feel the calling that wakes you in the middle of the night. You're not being rude. You're being responsible. You're not ignoring people. You're ignoring distractions. There comes a moment when you realize that protecting your peace is more important than being understood. At the edge of misunderstanding, you've learned to stay silent, to not let the noise pull you off your path. And that's when you realize, sometimes, the most powerful thing you can say is nothing at all. Just walk. Just grow. Just focus. Because the people who are truly meant for you won't need constant validation to believe in your worth. They'll respect the silence, they'll honor your journey, and if they're truly assigned by God, they'll meet you again at the next level. You don't need the crowd to clap. You need the courage to keep going. And the moment you start turning your attention inward, you'll discover something powerful. Peace is not something you chase. It's something you create within. How many of us have spent our lives looking for peace in all the wrong places, in relationships, achievements, material things, titles, or approval from others. We convince ourselves that if I can just fix everything on the outside, then maybe I'll feel calm on the inside. But the truth is, peace is never found outside of you. It begins the moment you decide to stop relying on people and circumstances to give it to you. When you stop watching others and start working on yourself, everything begins to shift. Clarity comes the moment you stop comparing. When you stop measuring your progress against someone else's timeline, you step into a freedom you didn't know was possible. You stop living under the burden of their expectations and begin walking in alignment with your God-given purpose. And that, in itself, is a beautiful thing. Realizing that you don't need anyone's permission to have peace. You don't need to meet their standards. You only need to meet God's standard for your life. And that alone is more than enough. 3D. Moment you choose to focus on your growth instead of their opinions, you'll realize how much energy you've been wasting. How many hours have been lost worrying about what others think, what they're doing, what they have, and how far they've gone? It's easy to fall into that trap, especially in a world obsessed with comparison and competition. But when you shift your focus to your own development, your own assignment, your personal calling, you become so full of what's inside of you that you no longer have the space to compare. You begin to see that what they're doing, what they're saying, what they have, it doesn't matter. Because your peace comes from knowing you're doing what God has called you to do, not what the world expects you to imitate. As you begin living in peace that comes from within, you also begin to hear heaven's voice more clearly. And that's when it hits you. Peace isn't a reward you find out there. It's a strength planted deep within. There's a profound power in realizing that true peace starts from the inside. When you learn how to cultivate peace in your own heart, no one can take it from you. Life will throw its hardest punches: disappointment, rejection, loss, frustration. But when your peace is built from the inside out, nothing can shake you. The storm may rage, the winds may howl, but you remain grounded. That's the kind of strength we desperately need today. Not a fragile peace tied to moments or people, but the kind that comes from truly knowing who you are, and more importantly, whose you are. A peace that flows from God, not from circumstances. And when you find that kind of peace, you begin to see its fruit show up in every area of your life. You gain clarity in your mind, confidence in your steps, joy in your soul, and the ability to remain steady no matter what life brings your way. Here's the beautiful part. When you cultivate peace within, everything around you starts to shift. Relationships, circumstances, even your challenges, they all begin to move. Why? Because peace carries its own power. It transforms the atmosphere. When you are at peace with yourself, you no longer attract chaos. You no longer tolerate toxic environments. You stop chasing what drains you. Instead, you begin to attract the right people, the right opportunities, and the right blessings. When you make peace a priority, when you truly focus on your growth, everything around you begins to align with that inner harmony. The energy you pour into your inner world will eventually reflect in your outer world. So why do we still chase external validation? Why do we search for peace in people or things that were never meant to provide it? Because we've been conditioned to believe that our worth and peace depend on things outside of us. But when you finally realize that peace is both a choice and a process, you begin to take your power back. You stop waiting for someone else to make you feel good about yourself. You stop depending on external circumstances to define your joy. You make the conscious decision that your peace comes from the inside out. And that's where your true strength begins. Because while the world keeps pulling, distracting, shaking, and telling you that you're not enough, you'll stand firm. Because your heart is already at peace. When you've made peace your foundation, you begin to walk differently, no longer dragged by the chaos around you. But to truly keep that peace, there's one truth you must never forget. Peace is a choice. You get to decide whether you'll be swept away by the noise of the world or anchored in something unshakable. And once you make that decision, once you declare that your peace is non-negotiable, everything around you starts to shift. No one can steal your peace unless you give them permission. So focus on yourself, work on yourself. Let your inner peace reflect your faith, your strength, and your commitment to the path God has placed you on. And when you do, you'll be amazed how effortlessly the pieces of life begin to fall into place. There's something deeply powerful about being still in a world that never stops moving. Everyone around you is running, pushing, climbing, competing. But you're learning to sit still in silence. You're discovering that progress doesn't always look like motion. Sometimes it looks like patience, like waiting, like trusting when everything around you is shouting panic. Those quiet moments, God is doing a deep work within you, a work that requires no applause, no spotlight, and no rush. It is a sacred work, a hidden work, one that can only be completed in stillness. The world will try to convince you to go faster, do more, prove something, but God will often call you to rest, to pause, to be still, and know that He is God. In stillness, you find strength. In silence, you find clarity. In waiting, you find direction. Because sometimes the loudest thing you can do is nothing at all. Victory isn't always found in the noise, the hustle, or the performance. It's often won in the quiet surrender, in the sacred moments when you simply let go and trust. When we rush through life, we miss the moments that actually matter. We overlook the lessons waiting in stillness, the wisdom that doesn't come with sound, but with surrender. And what you'll begin to notice as you focus on your inner world and embrace the quiet is this: the more space you give God to move, the more He reveals Himself. Because silence isn't the absence of sound, it's the presence of God at work. It's when you stop trying to control, fix, and force, and instead open your hands and let Him take over. He moves in silence. He works in stillness. He prepares you in the quiet places for what's coming next. We've been conditioned to believe that silence is emptiness. But the truth is, silence is often where God works most deeply. We've been taught that stillness equals stagnation, that if we're not loud, we're not moving. But that mindset has blinded us to the beauty of growth that happens in secret. We've been trained to believe that noise equals productivity. But in reality, some of the most important growth in your life will take place when no one's watching, no one applauding, no one cheering you on. It's in those quiet, hidden places where you feel forgotten that you're actually being prepared for something far bigger than you could ever dream of. Because it's in the waiting that God develops the character you'll need to carry the blessing He's about to place in your hands. And the way He moves, it won't always match your expectations. Sometimes He moves in ways you can't make sense of, in detours, delays, even disappointments. But if you're willing to stay, to be silent, to trust the process, you will see that He is working all things together for your good. In the silence, you become stronger. In the stillness, you grow deeper. The world tells you, keep running, keep pushing, don't stop. But God says, be still and know that I am God. And in that stillness, you find something the world can't offer: confidence, clarity, and unshakable peace. Here's the thing: when you finally learn to be silent, you start hearing things you never could in the noise. You begin to hear God's voice more clearly. You begin to recognize the true desires of your heart, not the ones shaped by comparison, but the ones shaped by calling. You begin to hear what truly matters, what truly aligns with your purpose. And as you embrace that silence, you realize your life is not defined by how loud you are, but by the depth of your peace, your strength, and your faith. Silence teaches you wisdom, and the more you sit with it, the more you learn. You learn about yourself, your patterns, your fears, your true identity. You learn about your purpose, what you were created to do. And most of all, you learn to let go of chasing fleeting things and instead focus on what's eternal. And the longer you remain still, the clearer it becomes. The life you've been trying to build through your own strength was never meant to be built by you alone. It was meant to be built with God. And it's only when you learn to rest in His presence, to be quiet before Him, that you start to see the true magnitude of what He's preparing for you. So stop rushing your process. Stop comparing your timeline to theirs. Stop looking at someone else's progress and thinking you're behind. You're not late. You're not forgotten. You're being refined. When you lay down your efforts and allow God to move in the silence, something sacred begins to take shape within you. You may not see anything clearly. Everything around you might still feel still and uneventful. But don't be fooled by the silence, because that's exactly where God is working. He is working in you, even in the moments when it feels like absolutely nothing is happening. When everything on the outside seems quiet, your spirit is being prepared for something greater than you can currently imagine. And then, when God's timing arrives, in the right season, at the appointed hour, you'll see the fruit of all the quiet work that's been unfolding beneath the surface. The days no one saw, the nights you spent alone in prayer, the moments you chose trust over fear, and when it finally happens, you'll know. Every second of stillness was worth it. Every moment of patience. Every silent step of faith when nothing seemed to move. So stay in the silence. Stay focused. Most of all, keep trusting the process. You may not see the outcome yet. You may still be waiting. But remember, God doesn't operate on human timelines. He moves according to eternal purpose. And then, the moment arrives. Not with thunder crashing or lights flashing, but with a deep, unshakable peace that quietly fills your soul. A knowing that you are ready, not because everything around you has changed, but because something within you has been made new. You've walked through the silence, through the waiting, through seasons that felt like nothing, only to realize God wasn't just doing something for you. He was doing something in you. And it's that quiet inner work that lays the foundation for every door that is about to open. You're not behind. You're not forgotten. You've been perfectly positioned for a purpose that only you were chosen to carry. So don't rush. Don't grow weary. Don't silence God's whisper just to chase the world's applause. Keep going, even if no one sees, even if it's quiet, even if it's hard. Because in that very silence, something miraculous is being born. If this message spoke to your heart, don't leave without hitting subscribe. Join a community that values growth, depth, and divine purpose, even in the quiet seasons. Our next video will take you deeper into how God uses pain, silence, and even what feels like failure to guide you into your true calling. Subscribe today and don't miss what's coming next, because your healing isn't just for you, it's meant to help heal others too. You've been silent long enough. Now it's time to move in power.